James Morrison woke up before the sun came up. He did this every day. At 58 years old, his body hurt in places he never knew existed. His back ached from lifting hay bales. His hands were rough and cut from fixing fences. But he got up anyway because the cattle needed him. He walked to his kitchen and made coffee in the same old pot his wife Sarah used to use. The coffee tasted bitter, but he drank it anyway. Everything tasted different after Sarah died 2 years ago. Food had no flavor. Life had no color. The ranch felt too big and too quiet without her laugh filling the empty rooms. James looked out his kitchen window at his land. 2,000 acres of Montana grassland stretched as far as he could see. His grandfather had bought this land in 1952. His father had worked it his whole life. Now it was James's turn, but he was failing. The cattle were getting sick. The equipment was breaking down. The bills kept coming, but the money did not. Yesterday he got a letter from the bank. They wanted their money. If he could not pay soon, they would take his ranch. This land was all he had left of his family. All he had left of Sarah. He could not lose it. That morning, James drove his old truck to town. The truck was 20 years old and made strange noises, but it still ran. He was going to an auction. The newspaper said they were selling farm equipment. Maybe he could find a good tractor for cheap. Maybe he could fix his money problems. The auction was held at an old warehouse on the edge of town. James had never been to this place before. When he arrived, he saw many cars in the parking lot. Some were expensive cars that did not belong to farmers. Some had license plates from other states. This seemed strange for a farm equipment auction. James paid $3 to get inside. This was all the money he had in his wallet after buying gas for his truck. He hoped to find something useful and cheap. The man at the door gave him a number card. Number 47. James held the card and walked inside. The warehouse was full of people. They sat on metal chairs facing a small stage. Most of the people looked like they had money. They wore nice clothes and expensive watches. They did not look like farmers. James felt out of place in his old jeans and work boots. James found an empty chair near the back. He looked around for tractors or farm tools, but he did not see any. Instead, there were boxes on tables. The boxes were closed, so he could not see what was inside. This was not what he expected. The auctioneer was a thin man with a loud voice. He started the auction by selling small boxes. People bid on them without knowing what was inside. James thought this was silly. Why would anyone buy something without looking at it first? Then something happened that made James's stomach feel sick. 2 men brought a young woman onto the stage. She was maybe 20 years old. Her hands were tied behind her back. Her eyes looked scared and empty. The auctioneer started talking about her like she was a thing to be sold. James could not believe what he was seeing. Were they selling people? In America? In 2023? He looked around the room. Other people were acting like this was normal. Some men were holding up their number cards, making bids. James felt like he was having a bad dream. More women were brought onto the stage. Some looked very young. All of them looked scared. The men bidding on them talked about the women like they were cars or cattle. James's hands started shaking. He wanted to leave, but his feet would not move. Then they brought out a girl who looked different from the others. She had Asian features and black hair. Her clothes were dirty and torn. She was so thin that James could see her bones through her skin. But what made James's heart break was her eyes. They were the eyes of someone who had given up hope. The auctioneer said her name was Li Wei. He said she was 19 years old and from China. He talked about her like she was a work animal. The bidding started at $50. James watched in horror as men raised their cards to bid on this girl's life. James thought about his wife Sarah. Sarah had been a teacher. She helped children who came from other countries. She always said that every person deserved to be treated with respect and kindness. If Sarah were here, she would not just sit and watch this happen. The bidding went up to $200. Then $300. James looked at the girl on the stage. She was staring at the floor. She looked like she wanted to disappear. James remembered how Sarah looked when she was dying in the hospital. She had that same look of someone who was giving up. Something inside James broke. He could not watch this happen. He could not let these men buy this girl like she was a thing. Before he knew what he was doing, James raised his number card high in the air. $3, he shouted. The whole room went quiet. Everyone turned to look at James. The auctioneer looked confused. The other bidders looked angry. James did not care. He kept his card up high. Did you say $3? The auctioneer asked. Yes, James said. His voice was stronger now. $3. One of the men who had been bidding laughed. Old man, the bid is at $300, not $3. I know, James said. But $3 is all I have. And $3 is more than any human being should cost. The room was completely quiet now. The girl on the stage looked up for the first time. She looked at James with surprise. James looked back at her and nodded. He was trying to tell her that everything would be okay. The auctioneer did not know what to do. This had never happened before. Some of the bidders started getting angry. They wanted to continue the auction. But James kept his card up. He would not put it down. Sir, the auctioneer said, you cannot bid $3 when the current bid is $300. Why not? James asked. This is America. I have the right to make any bid I want. More men started getting angry. They stood up from their chairs. Some of them started walking toward James. James was scared, but he did not move. He thought about Sarah and how proud she would be of him right now. Then something unexpected happened. A woman in the crowd started clapping. Then another person joined her. Soon half the room was clapping for James. The other half looked very angry. The auctioneer looked nervous. He did not know what to do with so many people watching and clapping. Finally, he made a decision that would change everything. Going once, he said quickly. Going twice when he looked around the room. The angry men were shouting, but the clapping was louder. Sold to number 47 for $3. James could not believe it. He had actually won. Now he had to figure out what to do next. He had just bought a human being for $3, and he had no idea how to save her life. James walked toward the stage with shaking legs. His heart was beating so fast he thought it might stop. The girl named Li Wei was still standing there. She looked at him with wide, frightened eyes. She did not know if this old man would hurt her or help her. Two big men brought Li Wei down from the stage. They pushed her toward James roughly. One of them untied her hands and gave James a piece of paper. It looked like some kind of receipt, like he had just bought a car instead of a human being. She's your problem now, old man, one of the men said. He had a mean smile on his face. James looked at the paper, then threw it on the ground. He looked at Li Wei and tried to smile, but she stepped back from him. She was scared of everyone now. James understood why. It's okay, James said softly. I won't hurt you. My name is James. Li Wei did not understand most of his words, but she heard something kind in his voice. Still, she did not trust him. Men had hurt her too many times before. The angry men from the auction were getting closer. James heard them talking to each other. They were planning something bad. James knew he had to get Li Wei out of there quickly. We need to go, James said to Li Wei. He pointed toward the door. Come with me. Now. Li Wei did not understand his words, but she understood his fear. She nodded and followed him toward the exit. James walked as fast as he could without running. He did not want to make the angry men more upset than they already were. Just as they reached the door, someone grabbed James's shoulder. It was one of the men who had been bidding on Li Wei. He was much younger than James and much stronger. Where do you think you're going, old man? The man asked. His breath smelled like alcohol. You just ruined our business. Let me go, James said. He was trying to sound brave, but his voice was shaking. You don't know what you just did, another man said. That girl is worth a lot of money. You can't just take her for $3. James looked at Li Wei. She was shaking with fear. She understood enough to know these men wanted to hurt them both. I paid for her fair and square, James said. The auctioneer said she was mine. The first man laughed. You think this is some kind of game? You think you can just walk in here and mess up our operation? James realized these men were part of something bigger and more dangerous than he had thought. This was not just an auction. This was organized crime. These men sold people for money, and they were not going to let an old rancher ruin their business. Look, James said, trying to stay calm. I don't want any trouble. I just want to take this girl home where she'll be safe. Safe? The second man laughed. She's not going anywhere with you. That's when Li Wei did something brave. She stepped in front of James even though she was scared. She started speaking in Chinese very fast and very angry. James could not understand her words, but he understood her meaning. She was telling these men that she was going with James. This made the men even angrier. One of them reached for Li Wei, but James stepped between them. Don't touch her, James said. His voice was stronger now. The man pushed James hard. James fell backward and hit his head on the wall. Li Wei screamed and knelt down next to him. She was trying to help him get up. That's when James remembered something Sarah used to tell him. She said that sometimes doing the right thing means being brave even when you're scared. James got back on his feet and looked the men in the eyes. "I'm taking her home," he said. "And if you try to stop me, I'm calling the police." The men looked at each other. They were not expecting an old man to fight back. They were used to people being too scared to stand up to them. James took out his old phone and held it up. "I'm calling 911 right now," he said. "You don't want to do that, old man," the first man said. "We have friends everywhere. The police won't help you," but James was already dialing. He pressed the numbers 911 and waited. The phone started ringing. "911, what's your emergency?" a voice said. "I need help," James said loudly so everyone could hear. "I'm at the warehouse on Mill Street. There are men here selling people. I need police right now." The men looked scared now. They did not want police to come. They started backing away from James and Li Wei. "This isn't over," one of them said. Then they walked away quickly. James hung up the phone and looked at Li Wei. She was looking at him like she had never seen anyone be brave before. "Come on," James said gently. "Let's get out of here before they come back." They walked to James's truck together. Li Wei had never seen a truck like this before. It was old and dirty, but it looked safe compared to where she had been. James opened the passenger door for her and helped her get inside. Li Wei sat in the passenger seat and looked around. The truck smelled like hay and coffee. There was a picture of a woman hanging from the mirror. The woman had kind eyes and a warm smile. Li Wei pointed at the picture and looked at James with a question in her eyes. "That's my wife, Sarah," James said. "She died 2 years ago. She was a good woman. She would have liked you." Li Wei did not understand all his words, but she understood that this picture was important to James. She nodded and touched the picture gently. James started the truck and began driving away from the warehouse. His hands were still shaking from what had just happened. He kept looking in his mirrors to make sure no one was following them. Li Wei sat very still in her seat. She did not know where this man was taking her. She had learned not to trust anyone, but something about James felt different. He had protected her from the bad men. He had called for help. Maybe he really was trying to save her. After driving for a few minutes, James pulled over at a gas station. He got out of the truck and made another phone call. This time he called the FBI. He told them about the auction and the men who were selling people. He gave them the address of the warehouse and told them to hurry. When James got back in the truck, Li Wei was crying. Not the loud crying of someone in pain, but the quiet crying of someone who had not felt hope for a long time. "It's going to be okay," James said softly. "You're safe now. I promise." Li Wei looked at him and tried to smile. She said something in Chinese that James did not understand, but he knew she was saying thank you. As they drove toward James's ranch, Li Wei looked out the window at the wide Montana sky. She had not seen so much open space in months. She had been locked in small, dark rooms for so long that she had forgotten what freedom looked like. James drove carefully and slowly. He did not want to scare Li Wei any more than she already was. He kept talking to her in a gentle voice, even though she could not understand most of what he was saying. He was trying to let her know that she was safe now. When they finally reached the ranch, Li Wei saw the big house and all the land around it. She had grown up on a farm in China, so she understood what this place was. It felt peaceful and quiet, so different from the horrible places she had been kept. James parked the truck and looked at Li Wei. "This is my home," he said. "Now it's your home too if you want it to be." Li Wei did not understand his exact words, but she understood his kindness. For the first time in months, she felt like maybe everything would be okay. The first night was the hardest. James showed Li Wei to Sarah's old sewing room. It had a bed, a window, and a door that locked from the inside. James thought Li Wei would feel safer if she could lock the door herself. "This is your room," James said, pointing around the small space. "You can sleep here. You're safe." Li Wei stood in the doorway and looked around the room. She saw the bed with clean white sheets. She saw the window that looked out at the mountains. She saw the lock on the door. She had not had her own room with a lock for so long that she had forgotten what privacy felt like. James brought her a glass of water and some crackers. Li Wei was very hungry, but she was afraid to eat. What if this was a trick? What if James was just being nice to her before he hurt her like the other men had? James saw that she was afraid to eat. He sat down on the floor near the door, far away from her so she would not feel trapped. He took a cracker and ate it himself to show her it was safe. Food, he said, pointing to the crackers. Good food, not poison. Li Wei understood the word food. She was so hungry that her stomach hurt. Slowly, she took a cracker and ate it. It was the first real food she had eaten in days. She started crying again, but this time she was crying because someone was being kind to her. That night, Li Wei did not sleep much. Every time she heard a noise, she thought the bad man had come to take her back. But James never tried to open her door. He never bothered her. In the morning, she heard him making breakfast in the kitchen. When Li Wei finally came out of her room, James smiled at her. He had made eggs and toast. He put a plate on the table for her and sat down across from her with his own plate. "Good morning," James said. "Did you sleep okay?" Li Wei did not understand his question, but she understood that he was being nice to her. She pointed to the food and said thank you in English. These were some of the only English words she knew. James's eyes lit up when he heard her speak English. "You know some English," he said. "That's good. We can learn to talk to each other." After breakfast, James showed Li Wei around the house. He showed her the bathroom and how to turn on the shower. He showed her the kitchen and told her she could eat anything she wanted. He showed her the living room where there were many books. Li Wei saw some books that had pictures and simple English words. These were the books that Sarah had used to teach immigrant children. James picked up one of the books and opened it to the first page. Sarah used to teach with these, James said, pointing to the picture of his wife. She helped people learn English. Maybe these books can help you too. Li Wei took the book and looked at the pictures. She saw simple drawings of houses, cars, animals, and people. Under each picture was an English word. She pointed to a picture of a house and tried to say the English word. "House," she said slowly. "That's right," James said. "House, this is a house." He pointed around the room. Li Wei smiled. This was the first time she had smiled in months. Learning English meant she could talk to James. It meant she could tell him her story. It meant she could say thank you properly. Over the next few days, James tried to make Li Wei feel comfortable. He never came too close to her. He never raised his voice. He always knocked on her door before talking to her. He was trying to show her that not all men were dangerous. Li Wei spent most of her time in her room reading the English books. She was a fast learner. She had been a good student in China before the bad things happened to her. Soon she knew words like water, food, thank you, and please. On the third day, FBI agents came to the ranch. James had called them to report the auction. Li Wei was scared when she saw the cars coming up the driveway. She thought the bad man had found her. James saw that she was afraid. "It's okay," he said. "These are good people. They want to help you." The FBI agents were a man named Agent Rodriguez and a woman named Agent Chen. Agent Chen could speak Chinese, which made Li Wei feel better. Finally, she could tell someone her whole story in her own language. Li Wei told Agent Chen about how she had been promised a good job in America. She told her about the men who had lied to her and brought her to the United States. She told her about the horrible places they had kept her and the terrible things they had made her do. Agent Chen translated Li Wei's story for James and Agent Rodriguez. When James heard what Li Wei had been through, he felt sick and angry. He could not believe that people could be so cruel to a young girl. "We need Li Wei to testify against these men," Agent Rodriguez said. "Her testimony could help us save other girls who are being sold." James looked at Li Wei. She looked scared again. "It's her choice," he said. "I won't make her do anything she doesn't want to do." Agent Chen talked to Li Wei in Chinese. Li Wei thought for a long time. Finally, she nodded. She would testify. She wanted to help save other girls like her. After the FBI agents left, Li Wei seemed different. She was still scared, but she was also brave. She had decided to fight back against the people who had hurt her. That evening, James and Li Wei sat on the front porch and watched the sunset. Li Wei was reading one of Sarah's English books. James was drinking coffee and thinking about his wife. "James," Li Wei said suddenly. It was the first time she had said his name. James looked at her. "Yes?" Li Wei pointed to herself and said, "Li Wei." Then she pointed to James and said, "James." Then she pointed to the house and said, "Home?" James understood what she was asking. She wanted to know if this could really be her home. "Yes," James said. "This is your home now, for as long as you want it to be." Li Wei smiled again. She was starting to understand that James was different from the men who had hurt her. He did not want anything from her except to see her safe and happy. The next morning, Li Wei woke up early. She heard James outside taking care of his cattle. She looked out her window and saw him working alone. He looked tired and old. Li Wei realized that James was working very hard to take care of his ranch by himself. Li Wei had grown up on a farm in China. She knew how to take care of animals. She knew about growing food and fixing things. Maybe she could help James the same way he was helping her. When James came inside for breakfast, he was surprised to see that Li Wei had cooked eggs and rice. She had found rice in his kitchen and made it the Chinese way. She had also made tea. "You cooked," James said. "Thank you." "This looks delicious." Li Wei pointed to the food and said, "I help." James understood. Li Wei wanted to help him the same way he was helping her. This made him happy, but he was also worried. He did not want Li Wei to feel like she had to work to pay him back for saving her. "You don't have to work," James said slowly. "You can rest. You can just learn English and get better." Li Wei shook her head. She pointed to herself and said, "Strong." Then she pointed outside and said, "I help farm." James saw that this was important to Li Wei. She did not want to just take his help. She wanted to give something back. She wanted to feel useful and strong again. "Okay," James said. "We can work together. But only if you want to." After breakfast, Li Wei followed James outside. She watched him feed the cattle and check the fences. She saw that some of the animals looked sick. She saw that the fences needed fixing. She saw that James was trying to do too much work by himself. Li Wei walked over to a sick cow and looked at it carefully. In China, her grandmother had taught her about taking care of sick animals. She could see what was wrong with this cow. She got James's attention and pointed to the cow. Then she made gestures to show him what medicine the cow needed. James was amazed. Li Wei knew about farming. From that day on, Li Wei and James worked together. Li Wei's English got better every day. James learned some Chinese words too. They started to understand each other better. Li Wei began to smile more often. She began to laugh sometimes when James told jokes. She began to feel like a person again instead of just a victim. One evening, Li Wei asked James about the picture in his truck. "Wife?" she said in English. James nodded. "Yes, Sarah was my wife. She died from cancer." Li Wei knew the word died. She had seen too much death. She put her hand on James's shoulder and said, "Sorry." James looked at this young woman who had been through so much pain, and yet she was trying to comfort him. He realized that Li Wei was not just someone he had saved. She was becoming his friend. 3 months after James saved Li Wei from the auction, everything on the ranch was changing. Li Wei's English was getting much better. She could now have real conversations with James. More importantly, she was helping him save his failing ranch. Every morning, Li Wei woke up before sunrise, just like James did. She would make breakfast while James went outside to check on the cattle. When he came back inside, they would eat together and plan their day. "The brown cow with the spot on her head is sick again," James said one morning over breakfast. Li Wei knew which cow he was talking about. "Her name should be Chocolate," she said, trying to make James smile. "In China, my grandmother taught me about sick cows. Chocolate needs special grass." James was amazed by how much Li Wei knew about farming. She had grown up on her family's farm in a small village in China. Her grandmother had been famous in their village for knowing how to heal sick animals with natural medicines. "What kind of special grass?" James asked. Li Wei tried to think of the English words. "Green grass that grows near water. It helps stomach problems." She pointed to her own stomach to show what she meant. James knew exactly what she was talking about. There was a type of grass that grew near the stream on his property. He had never thought to use it as medicine for his cattle. After breakfast, Li Wei led James to the stream. She showed him the grass she meant. It was a common grass that James had always ignored. Li Wei picked some of it and smelled it. "Yes," she said, "this is right grass. We dry it first, then mix with regular food." James watched as Li Wei carefully picked the grass and showed him how to prepare it. She had learned this from her grandmother when she was just a little girl. Now she was using this knowledge to help save his ranch. They brought the dried grass back to Chocolate and mixed it with her regular feed. Within 2 days, the cow was feeling better. James could not believe it. His expensive veterinarian had not been able to help Chocolate, but Li Wei had healed her with simple grass. Word spread quickly among the local farmers. They heard that James Morrison had found a way to heal sick cattle without expensive medicine. Soon neighbors were coming to ask Li Wei for advice about their own animals. Li Wei was nervous about talking to strangers, but she wanted to help. She had been hurt by so many people that she found it hard to trust new faces. But when she saw sick animals, she forgot about her fear. She just wanted to make them better. "You have a gift," James told her one evening as they watched the healthy cattle grazing in the field. "Sarah would have said you have healing hands." Li Wei looked at her hands. They were rough from farm work now, but James was right. Animals seemed to get better when she touched them and gave them the right medicine. But Li Wei's knowledge was not just about healing animals. She also knew about growing food in a better way. She had learned about organic farming from her family in China. They had never used chemicals on their crops because they could not afford them. Instead, they used natural ways to make plants grow strong. James's ranch had been losing money because his cattle were often sick, and his grass was not growing well. He had been using expensive chemicals to try to make the grass grow better, but it was not working. The chemicals were also making the ground less healthy each year. Li Wei suggested they try a different way. "In China, we use cow poop to make grass grow better," she explained. "Also, we plant different things together. Some plants help other plants grow stronger." James had heard of organic farming, but he had never tried it. It seemed too risky to change everything when he was already struggling to pay his bills. But Li Wei's ideas were working so well with the sick animals that he decided to trust her. They started small. Li Wei showed James how to use the cattle's waste as fertilizer, instead of buying expensive chemicals. She showed him which plants to grow together to make the soil healthier. She taught him about rotating the cattle to different fields so the grass could recover. At first, James was worried. The changes were slow and he needed money quickly to pay the bank. But after 2 months, he started seeing results. The grass was growing thicker and greener than it had in years. The cattle were healthier and gaining more weight. Most importantly, he was spending much less money on medicine and chemicals. One day, a man came to the ranch who changed everything. His name was Mr. Peterson, and he owned a company that sold organic beef to expensive restaurants in the city. He had heard about James's healthy cattle and wanted to see them for himself. Mr. Peterson walked around the ranch with James and Li Wei. He was impressed by how healthy the animals looked and how green the grass was. He asked many questions about their farming methods. "I've been looking for a ranch that raises cattle the natural way," Mr. Peterson said. "My customers pay extra for meat from animals that are raised without chemicals. They want to know the cattle were treated well and ate natural food." James felt his heart beating faster. This could be the answer to his money problems. "How much extra do your customers pay?" James asked. "About twice as much as regular beef prices," Mr. Peterson replied. "But I need a steady supply of at least 50 cattle every 6 months." James looked at Li Wei. He had 50 cattle, but he had never sold that many at once before. Li Wei could see that James was excited but also nervous. "We can do it," Li Wei said quietly to James. "Cattle are very healthy now. They grow fast with good grass and no chemicals." Mr. Peterson heard Li Wei speak and looked at her with interest. "Are you the one who knows about the natural farming methods?" Li Wei felt nervous with this stranger looking at her, but James nodded encouragingly. "Yes," she said. "I learned from my grandmother in China." Mr. Peterson smiled. "Would you be willing to write down your methods? I have other ranchers who want to learn how to farm this way. I could pay you for a consultation." Li Wei looked surprised. Someone wanted to pay her for her knowledge. She had always just thought of it as things her grandmother had taught her. "Li Wei's knowledge saved my ranch," James said proudly. "She's the best farmer I've ever known." That day, Mr. Peterson signed a contract to buy James's cattle at the higher organic price. He also paid Li Wei $300 to write down her farming methods so he could share them with other ranchers. That evening, James and Li Wei sat on the front porch, counting the money from Mr. Peterson. It was more money than James had made in 6 months. "We did this together," James said to Li Wei. "You saved my ranch." Li Wei shook her head. "You saved my life first. Now we save ranch together." James realized that Li Wei was right. They had become real partners. She was not just someone he had rescued. She was not just someone staying in his house. She was his partner in running the ranch. "Li Wei," James said, "I want to make you an official partner in this ranch. Half of everything we make should be yours." Li Wei's eyes filled with tears. James, you already give me home and safety. I do not need money. You need more than just safety, James replied. You need independence. You need to know that you can take care of yourself. Sarah always said that the best way to help someone is to help them help themselves. Li Wei thought about this. In China, women did not usually own land or businesses, but this was America. Here she could be a real partner with James. Okay, she said finally. We are partners. They shook hands on the front porch as the sun set behind the mountains. James felt happier than he had since Sarah died. Li Wei felt stronger than she had since she was taken from China. Neither of them knew that their partnership would soon face its biggest test. The men who had lost money when James bought Li Wei for $3 had not forgotten about them. They were planning to get their revenge. The first sign of trouble came on a cold October morning. James was feeding the cattle when he noticed that someone had cut his fence during the night. 20 of his best cattle had wandered onto the road. It took him and Li Wei 3 hours to get them all back safely. This was not an accident, Li Wei said. Looking at the clean cuts in the wire. Someone did this on purpose, James agreed. The cuts were too neat to be from an animal or weather. Someone with wire cutters had done this while they were sleeping. 2 days later, James found dead fish floating in the stream where the cattle drank water. Someone had poisoned the water upstream from his property. James called the sheriff, but there was no way to prove who had done it. We need to be more careful, James told Li Wei that evening. I think the men from the auction are trying to hurt our business. Li Wei was not surprised. She had been expecting something like this. In China, we say that when you fight bad people, they fight back twice as hard. The next week, things got worse. Agent Chen from the FBI called James with bad news. The trial against the human traffickers was starting soon, and Li Wei was the main witness. But the defense lawyers were trying to make Li Wei look bad. They're saying that Li Wei came to America willingly, Agent Chen explained over the phone. They're trying to say she wasn't really a victim. James felt angry. That's crazy. I saw her at that auction. She was clearly being sold against her will. We know that, Agent Chen said. But these defense lawyers are very good at confusing juries. They're also saying that Li Wei is lying to get a green card to stay in America. This was James's biggest worry. Li Wei was still in the country on a special visa for crime victims. If the jury did not believe her story, she could be sent back to China. James could not let that happen. What can we do? James asked. Li Wei needs to testify. Her testimony is the strongest evidence we have. But you should know that this will be very hard for her. The defense lawyers will ask her difficult questions about everything that happened to her. When James told Li Wei about the phone call, she became very quiet. She was scared about testifying, but she was more scared about being sent back to China. If I go back to China, my family will not accept me, Li Wei said sadly. In Chinese culture, when bad things happen to a woman like what happened to me, the family feels shame. My parents told the police I was dead so they would not have to admit what happened. James felt his heart break for Li Wei. She had lost her family, her country, and almost her life. Now she might lose her new home too. We'll fight this, James said. I'll hire the best lawyer I can find. James spent most of his savings hiring a lawyer named Ms. Rodriguez. She was expensive, but she specialized in immigration cases. She explained that Li Wei had several options. The best option might be marriage to an American citizen, Ms. Rodriguez said. That would give Li Wei immediate protection from deportation. James and Li Wei looked at each other. They both knew what Ms. Rodriguez was suggesting. We're not married, James said quickly. Li Wei is like a daughter to me. I'm old enough to be her grandfather. Ms. Rodriguez nodded. I understand. But the law doesn't care about age differences between married couples. If you two got married, it would solve Li Wei's immigration problems immediately. After Ms. Rodriguez left, James and Li Wei sat on the front porch in awkward silence. Neither of them wanted to talk about marriage, but both of them were thinking about it. James, Li Wei said finally, I do not want you to marry me just to help me stay in America. That would not be fair to you. James looked at the mountains in the distance. Li Wei, you're the best thing that's happened to me since Sarah died. You saved my ranch. You made me feel useful again. But marriage should be about love, not just about helping someone with papers. Li Wei nodded. In China, many marriages are for practical reasons, not love. But I want to stay in America because I choose to, not because I married someone. They decided to fight the legal battles without getting married. It would be harder, but it would be honest. The threats against them continued. Someone broke the windows in James's barn. Someone let his chickens out of their coop, and foxes killed most of them. Someone spray-painted nasty words on his mailbox. James bought security cameras and installed them around the ranch. He also bought a shotgun, even though he hated guns. Sarah had always hated guns too, but James felt he had no choice. He had to protect Li Wei. One night, James woke up to the sound of his security alarm. He looked at the camera screens and saw 3 men near his barn. They were carrying gasoline cans. James grabbed his shotgun and called 911. Then he woke up Li Wei. "Stay in your room and lock the door," he told her. "Bad men are outside. The police are coming." But Li Wei would not stay in her room. "We are partners," she said. "I will not hide while you face danger alone." James wanted to argue with her, but there was no time. They could smell smoke coming from outside. The men were trying to burn down his barn. James and Li Wei went outside together. James carried his shotgun and Li Wei carried a baseball bat. The 3 men saw them coming and ran toward their car. "Stop right there," James shouted. He fired his shotgun into the air. The loud noise echoed across the valley. One of the men turned around. James recognized him from the auction. It was one of the men who had been angry when James bought Li Wei for $3. "You should have minded your own business, old man," the man shouted. "That girl belongs to us. She doesn't belong to anybody." James shouted back, "She's a free person." The man pulled out a gun and pointed it at James. Li Wei screamed and jumped in front of James to protect him. That's when they heard the police sirens getting closer. The 3 men ran to their car and drove away quickly. James and Li Wei put out the small fire in the barn before it could spread. When the police arrived, James gave them the video from his security cameras. The pictures were clear enough to identify the men. The police said they would try to arrest them, but Agent Chen called the next morning with more bad news. The men James had caught on camera were connected to a larger criminal organization. They had lawyers and money. They also had friends in some police departments in other states. "These people don't give up easily," Agent Chen warned. "They see Li Wei as their property and they see you as someone who stole from them. They won't stop trying to get revenge." James felt scared, but he also felt angry. "So what are we supposed to do? Just let them terrorize us?" "I'm going to arrange for extra police protection during Li Wei's testimony at the trial," Agent Chen said. "After that, you might want to think about moving somewhere else for a while." James looked around his ranch. This land had been in his family for 3 generations. Sarah was buried in the cemetery just 5 miles away. He did not want to leave, but he also could not let Li Wei get hurt because of his decision to save her. That evening, James and Li Wei talked about their options. They could sell the ranch and move far away. They could get married so Li Wei could stay in America legally. Or they could stay and fight, knowing that dangerous people wanted to hurt them. "What do you want to do?" James asked Li Wei. Li Wei thought for a long time before answering. 6 months ago I had no choices. Bad men made all my decisions for me. Now I have choices again because you gave me freedom. I choose to stay and fight. This is my home now." James smiled. Sarah would have said the same thing. She never backed down from a fight when she knew she was right. "Then we stay," Li Wei said. "We protect our home and each other." James nodded. Partners stick together. But that night, as James checked the locks on all the doors and windows, he wondered if they were making the right choice. These criminals had money and connections. James and Li Wei just had each other and a ranch full of cattle. James did not know that Li Wei was lying awake in her room, thinking about the same things. She was not afraid of the bad men hurting her. She had survived worse than anything they could do to her, but she was terrified that James might get hurt because he had tried to help her. Li Wei made a decision that night. If staying in America meant putting James in danger, she would rather go back to China. James had given her the most precious gift in the world, her freedom. She would not let anyone hurt him because of her. Winter came early to Montana that year. By November, snow was falling heavily, and the temperature dropped below 0 most nights. James had never worked so hard in his life. The ranch was doing well financially thanks to Li Wei's organic farming methods, but the constant threats from the criminals were wearing him down. James started having trouble sleeping. He would wake up several times each night to check the security cameras. He was losing weight because he was too worried to eat properly. His hands shook when he drank his morning coffee. Li Wei noticed that James was getting sick from stress. She watched him struggle to lift hay bales that used to be easy for him. She saw him take pills for his heart that he tried to hide from her. "James, you need to see a doctor," Li Wei said one morning when she found him sitting at the kitchen table, holding his chest and breathing heavily. "I'm fine," James said, but his face was pale and sweaty, just tired from all this work. Li Wei was not fooled. She had seen sick people before. James was pushing himself too hard, and the stress of protecting her was making him sick. That afternoon, while James was fixing a fence, Li Wei made a difficult decision. She called Ms. Rodriguez, the immigration lawyer. "I want to know about going back to China," Li Wei said. Ms. Rodriguez was surprised. "Why, I thought you wanted to stay in America." "I do want to stay," Li Wei explained. "But James is getting sick because he worries about me. Maybe it would be better for him if I left." "Li Wei, if you leave America now, you probably can never come back. And if you testify at the trial and then leave, the criminals might follow you to China. You would not be safe there either." Li Wei felt trapped. If she stayed, James might get sick and die from worry. If she left, the bad men might follow her and hurt her family in China. That evening, Li Wei was cooking dinner when she heard a loud crash outside. She looked out the window and saw James lying on the ground next to his truck. He had collapsed while carrying groceries from town. Li Wei ran outside and knelt next to James. He was conscious but very weak. His heart was beating too fast and he was having trouble breathing. "Call 911, James whispered. "I think I'm having a heart attack." Li Wei called for an ambulance and rode with James to the hospital in town. The doctor said that James was having heart problems because of too much stress and too little rest. "Mr. Morrison needs to stay in the hospital for at least a week," the doctor told Li Wei. "His heart is very weak right now. If he doesn't rest and reduce his stress, he could die." Li Wei sat next to James's hospital bed and held his hand. She felt terrible that her problems had made James sick. "I'm sorry," she whispered to James while he slept. "This is all my fault." When James woke up, he saw Li Wei crying next to his bed. "Don't cry," he said weakly. "I'm going to be okay." "No, you're not," Li Wei said. "Doctor says you're sick because you worry too much about me. I should not have let you take care of me. I should have been stronger." James tried to sit up, but he was too weak. "Li Wei, you are the strongest person I know. You survived things that would have broken most people. Taking care of you is not what made me sick. Caring about you made me want to live again." Li Wei did not understand, but the doctor said stress made you sick. "The stress came from the bad men threatening us," James explained. "Not from you being here. You made my life better, not worse." While James was in the hospital, Li Wei had to take care of the ranch by herself. She fed all the cattle, fixed the broken equipment, and dealt with Mr. Peterson's company when they came to pick up cattle for the restaurants. Li Wei discovered something important during that week. She was not helpless anymore. She could run the ranch by herself if she needed to. The scared girl who had been sold at auction was gone. In her place was a strong woman who could take care of herself and others. But Li Wei also discovered something else. She missed James terribly. The ranch felt empty without his laugh in the morning and his stories in the evening. She realized that James was not just someone who had saved her. He had become her family. On James's 5th day in the hospital, Li Wei made another phone call. This time she called her cousin in China. Li Wei had not talked to her family since she had been kidnapped, but she needed to try. "Wei Wei," her cousin said, using Li Wei's childhood nickname. "Is that really you? We thought you were dead." Li Wei explained everything that had happened to her. She told her cousin about being sold to criminals, about James saving her, and about her new life on the ranch in America. "Your parents told everyone you died in a car accident," her cousin explained. "They were too ashamed to admit what really happened. But I never believed you were dead. I've been saving money in case you ever came back." "How much money?" Li Wei asked. "About 30,000 American dollars, her cousin said. "I was going to use it to hire people to look for you." Li Wei's heart started beating faster. $30,000 was enough to pay off James's medical bills. It was enough to hire security guards to protect the ranch. It was enough to make their lives safe again. "I need that money," Li Wei told her cousin. "Not for me, but for the man who saved my life. He's sick because he's been protecting me, and I want to protect him now." Her cousin agreed to send the money immediately. When Li Wei told James about the money, he refused to accept it. "That's your family's money," James said from his hospital bed. You should use it to go to college or start your own business. James, Li Wei said firmly. You are my family now. This ranch is my home. Your problems are my problems, and my money is our money. We are partners, remember? James looked at Li Wei and saw that she was not the scared girl he had rescued anymore. She was a confident woman who was making her own decisions. Besides, Li Wei continued, I have been thinking about something. You saved my life when you bought me for $3. But I think I saved your life too. You said that taking care of me made you want to live again, so maybe we saved each other. James thought about this. Li Wei was right. Before she came to his ranch, he had been just waiting to die. He had no reason to get up in the morning except to feed the cattle. Li Wei had given him purpose again. You're right, James admitted. We did save each other, Li Wei smiled. Then it's settled. We used the money to make our ranch safe and our lives better, together. When James got out of the hospital, Li Wei had already used some of the money to hire a security company to protect the ranch. She had also paid off James's medical bills and bought new equipment for the farm. But the most important thing Li Wei had done was make a decision about the trial. She was going to testify against the criminals, no matter how scary it was. She was going to help put them in prison so they could not hurt other girls like her. Are you sure? James asked. Those lawyers will ask you very difficult questions. I'm sure, Li Wei said. I'm not afraid anymore. You taught me that sometimes doing the right thing means being brave even when you're scared. James smiled. Those were the exact words that Sarah used to say. That night, James and Li Wei sat on the front porch wrapped in blankets and drinking hot chocolate. The security guards were patrolling the ranch, so they felt safe for the first time in months. Li Wei, James said, I want to ask you something important. I want to legally adopt you as my daughter. Not for immigration reasons, but because that's how I feel about you. You're the daughter I never had. Li Wei's eyes filled with tears. In China, she had lost her family because of shame. In America, she had found a new father because of love. Yes, she said, I would be honored to be your daughter. As they hugged on the front porch, both James and Li Wei knew that their relationship had changed forever. They were not just partners in business anymore. They were not just friends who had helped each other. They were family, but they also knew that their biggest challenge was still ahead of them. The trial was starting soon, and Li Wei would have to face the men who had hurt her. She would have to tell her story in front of strangers and answer questions from lawyers who wanted to make her look like a liar. James squeezed Li Wei's hand. Whatever happens at that trial, we'll face it together. Li Wei squeezed back. Together, she agreed. The trial began on a cold February morning. Li Wei had been practicing her testimony with Agent Chen for weeks, but she was still nervous. James sat in the front row of the courtroom wearing his best suit. He wanted to show Li Wei that he was proud of her courage. The criminals looked different in court than they had at the auction. They wore expensive suits and sat next to fancy lawyers. But Li Wei recognized their faces. She would never forget the men who had hurt her and tried to sell her like an animal. When Li Wei took the stand to testify, her voice was strong and clear. She told the jury about being promised a good job in America. She described how the criminals had lied to her and brought her to the United States against her will. She explained how they had locked her up and forced her to work without pay. The defense lawyers tried to make Li Wei look bad, just like Agent Chen had warned. They asked her difficult questions about her life in China. They suggested that she had come to America willingly and was now lying to get citizenship. Isn't it true that you wanted to leave China and start a new life in America? One lawyer asked. Yes, I wanted to come to America, Li Wei answered honestly. But I wanted to come legally with proper papers. I wanted to work and earn money to send to my family. I did not want to be sold like a cow at auction. The lawyer tried to make Li Wei angry, but she stayed calm. James had taught her that anger makes people say stupid things. Li Wei was too smart to fall into that trap. And isn't it convenient that you met Mr. Morrison, who just happened to save you and give you a place to live? The lawyer continued. Li Wei looked at James and then back at the lawyer. There was nothing convenient about what happened to me. I was kidnapped, hurt, and sold to strangers. Mr. Morrison saved my life when he could have just walked away. That is not convenient. That is a miracle. The jury listened to Li Wei's testimony for 3 days. She answered every question with honesty and dignity. By the end, several jury members were crying as they listened to her story. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Finally, the jury found all the criminals guilty. They would go to prison for many years. Li Wei felt relieved, but she also felt sad. Testifying had brought back many painful memories. After the trial, James and Li Wei went back to their ranch. Spring was coming, and there was much work to do. They had cattle to take care of and fields to prepare for planting. The ranch was doing very well now, thanks to Li Wei's organic farming methods. One evening in April, Li Wei got a phone call that changed everything. It was her cousin in China. "Wei Wei," her cousin said, "I have news about your grandfather." Li Wei's grandfather had been very rich before the Communist Revolution in China. He had owned much land and many businesses. When the government took his property, he had hidden some gold and money in secret places. Only he knew where it was hidden. "Your grandfather died last month," her cousin explained. "Before he died, he told me where he hid his treasure. He said it belonged to you because you were his favorite grandchild." Li Wei was shocked. She had not seen her grandfather since she was a little girl. She did not know he had been thinking about her all these years. "How much money are we talking about?" Li Wei asked. "More than you can imagine," her cousin replied. "He hid gold worth about 2 million American dollars. He also left instructions that the money should be used to help you build a new life in America." Li Wei could not believe what she was hearing. $2 million was more money than she had ever dreamed of having. It was enough to buy her own ranch or to start her own business or to do anything she wanted. But Li Wei's first thought was not about what she could buy for herself. Her first thought was about James. She remembered how he had mortgaged his ranch to pay for her legal bills. She remembered how he had spent his life savings to keep her safe. She remembered how he had almost died from stress because he was worried about protecting her. "Can you send the money to America?" Li Wei asked her cousin. "Yes, but it will take some time to arrange, maybe 2 months." When Li Wei told James about the inheritance, he was happy for her but also worried. "Li Wei, this changes everything," James said. "With that much money, you can do whatever you want with your life. You don't need to stay here on this old ranch with an old man like me." Li Wei looked at James like he was crazy. "James, this ranch is my home. You are my family. Why would I want to leave?" "Because you're young and smart and beautiful," James replied. "You could go to college. You could travel the world. You could marry someone your own age and have children. You shouldn't waste your life taking care of cattle with me." Li Wei sat down next to James on the front porch. "James, do you know what freedom means?" James was confused by the question. "Freedom means you can do whatever you want." "No," Li Wei said. "Freedom means you can choose who you want to be and where you want to belong. For many months, bad men made all my choices for me. They decided where I lived, what I ate, what work I did. I had no freedom." James nodded, understanding. "When you saved me, you gave me back my choices," Li Wei continued. "Now I can choose my own life. And I choose to stay here with you. I choose to be your daughter. I choose to make this ranch our home together." James felt tears in his eyes. "But Li Wei, you could have so much more than this." Li Wei laughed. "James, what could be more important than family? What could be better than having a home where you are loved and safe? Money cannot buy those things." When the inheritance money arrived from China, Li Wei surprised James with her plans for it. She wanted to use the money to expand their ranch and turn it into something special. "I want to create a place where other victims of human trafficking can come to heal," Li Wei explained. "We can teach them about farming and give them jobs. We can help them learn English and become American citizens. We can show them that there is life after being hurt by bad people." James was amazed by Li Wei's vision. "That sounds wonderful, but are you sure you want to spend your inheritance on other people?" "James, you spent your life savings on me when you barely knew me," Li Wei replied. "You taught me that the best way to use money is to help people who need help. Besides, helping other survivors will help me too. It will give my suffering a purpose." Li Wei used part of her inheritance to pay off James's ranch completely. She used another part to build comfortable housing for trafficking survivors who would come to work and live on the ranch. She used the rest to buy more land and cattle so they could provide jobs for more people. The first survivor to come to their ranch was a young woman from Guatemala named Maria. She had been forced to work in factories without pay for 2 years before the FBI rescued her. She was scared and did not speak much English, just like Li Wei had been. Li Wei took Maria under her wing and taught her about organic farming. She helped Maria learn English using the same books that Sarah had used to teach immigrant children. Most importantly, Li Wei showed Maria that it was possible to build a new life after surviving terrible things. Soon, other survivors came to the ranch. There was Carlos from Honduras, who had been forced to work in construction. There was Aisha from Somalia, who had been sold as a domestic worker. There was Dmitry from Russia, who had been forced to work in restaurants. Each person brought their own skills and knowledge. Carlos knew about building and construction. Aisha knew about cooking and taking care of children. Dmitry knew about growing vegetables and herbs. Together with Li Wei's farming knowledge and James's experience running a ranch, they created something amazing. The local newspaper wrote a story about their ranch. Soon, people from all over Montana were coming to buy their organic beef and vegetables. Restaurants in the big cities wanted to buy their products. The ranch became more successful than James had ever imagined possible. But the most important success was not financial. It was seeing broken people become whole again. Li Wei watched survivors arrive scared and hopeless and leave strong and confident. She saw people who had been treated like slaves become business owners and American citizens. One evening, as Li Wei and James watched the sunset from their front porch, James said something that made Li Wei smile. "You know, Li Wei, I used to think I saved you that day at the auction, but I think you saved me too." Li Wei nodded. "We saved each other, James, and now we're saving other people too." James looked at the ranch that was now full of life and hope. Sarah would have loved this place. She always believed that good things happen when people help each other. Li Wei smiled. "I think Sarah is proud of us. I think she knows that her husband became the father I needed. And her books helped teach English to people who needed hope." As they sat together watching the stars come out over Montana, James and Li Wei knew they had created something special. They had turned a story that began with $3 at a terrible auction into a place where broken people could become whole again. Their journey together was not over. There would be more survivors to help, more challenges to face, and more lives to change. But they would face everything together, as family. 2 years after the trial, James Morrison stood in front of a judge in the county courthouse. But this time he was not there because of criminals or legal troubles. He was there to legally adopt Li Wei as his daughter. Li Wei wore a simple blue dress that Sarah would have loved. James wore his best suit, the same one he had worn to Sarah's funeral 3 years earlier. But today was not a day for sadness. Today was a day for celebrating family. "Mr. Morrison," the judge said, "do you promise to love and care for Li Wei Morrison as your own daughter for the rest of your life?" "I do," James said with tears in his eyes. "She already is my daughter in every way that matters." The judge smiled and signed the adoption papers. "Congratulations, Mr. Morrison and Miss Morrison. You are now legally father and daughter." Li Wei hugged James tightly. She finally had a real family again. More importantly, she had chosen this family herself. No one had forced her or sold her or told her what to do. She had made this choice with complete freedom. After the adoption ceremony, they drove back to their ranch. But it was not the same quiet, lonely place that Li Wei had first seen 2 years ago. Now the ranch was full of life and activity. Maria was in the vegetable garden, teaching 2 new survivors how to plant tomatoes. Carlos was building a new barn with help from Dmitry. Aisha was in the kitchen preparing lunch for everyone. The ranch now housed 12 survivors from 7 different countries, but Li Wei and James had bigger news to share with their ranch family. That evening, everyone gathered in the main house for dinner. It had become a tradition to eat together every night. They would share stories about their day and help each other with problems. For people who had been isolated and alone, having a family dinner every night was healing. "I have an announcement," Li Wei said as they finished eating Aisha's delicious chicken stew. Everyone looked at Li Wei with curiosity. She was glowing with happiness about something. "James and I have decided to start a foundation," Li Wei said. "We want to help survivors of human trafficking all across America, not just the ones who can come to our ranch." James stood up and put his hand on Li Wei's shoulder. "Li Wei's inheritance has given us enough money to help many more people. We're going to call it the Sarah Morrison Foundation, after my late wife who always believed in helping immigrants." The room erupted in cheers and applause. Everyone at the ranch understood how important this was. They had all been helped by James and Li Wei. Now they would be able to help others too. Over the next 6 months, the Sarah Morrison Foundation grew quickly. They opened offices in 3 states. They provided job training, English lessons, and legal help to hundreds of trafficking survivors. Most importantly, they gave people hope that life could be good again after experiencing terrible things. Li Wei became the face of the foundation. She traveled to conferences and universities, telling her story and teaching people about human trafficking. She was no longer the scared girl who could barely speak English. She was now a confident woman who could speak to rooms full of hundreds of people. But Li Wei's favorite part of her work was the individual meetings with survivors. She would sit with people who were just beginning their healing journey and tell them that recovery was possible. She would show them that they could be strong again. James was proud of Li Wei, but he worried about her traveling so much. He was now 61 years old and his health was not as good as it used to be. He needed help running the ranch and he missed having Li Wei around. That's when Li Wei made another important decision. She hired Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation to Agent Chen, to help run the foundation. Dr. Chen was a Chinese-American psychologist who specialized in helping trauma survivors. She had been following Li Wei's work and wanted to join their mission. With Dr. Chen handling the day-to-day operations of the foundation, Li Wei could spend more time at the ranch with James. She could focus on the work she loved most, farming and taking care of the people who had become her extended family. One spring morning, Li Wei was working in the garden when she heard a car coming up the ranch driveway. She looked up and saw a familiar truck. It was Dr. Martinez, the veterinarian from town. But Dr. Martinez was not alone. With him was a young man about Li Wei's age. The young man was tall and kind-looking, with gentle brown eyes and calloused hands that showed he was used to hard work. "Li Wei," Dr. Martinez called out. "I want you to meet my nephew, Miguel. He just graduated from veterinary school, and he's looking for a place to work. I thought he might be able to help you with your cattle." Li Wei wiped the dirt off her hands and walked over to meet Miguel. When she shook his hand, she felt something she had never felt before. Her heart started beating faster and she felt shy and nervous. Miguel seemed to feel the same way. He smiled at Li Wei and said, "Dr. Martinez has told me so much about the amazing work you're doing here. I would be honored to help with your animals." Over the next few weeks, Miguel came to the ranch several times to take care of sick cattle and horses. Li Wei found herself looking forward to his visits. Miguel was gentle with the animals and respectful to all the survivors at the ranch. He treated everyone with kindness no matter where they came from or what had happened to them. James noticed that Li Wei seemed happier when Miguel was around. She would spend extra time getting ready in the morning when she knew Miguel was coming. She would laugh more and smile more when he was there. One evening, James and Li Wei were sitting on the front porch when James decided to ask her about Miguel. "Li Wei," James said carefully. "Do you like Dr. Miguel?" Li Wei blushed. "He's very nice. He's good with the animals," James smiled. "That's not what I meant, and you know it." Li Wei was quiet for a moment. "James, I don't know how to like someone that way. After everything that happened to me, I thought I would never want to be close to a man again." James understood. Li Wei had been hurt so badly by men that it made sense she would be afraid of romantic relationships. "But Miguel is different," Li Wei continued. "When he looks at me, he doesn't see a victim or someone to be sorry for. He sees a strong woman who runs a successful ranch. He makes me feel normal." James nodded. "Sarah used to say that the right person makes you feel like the best version of yourself." "What if I'm not ready?" Li Wei asked. "What if I can't be a good girlfriend or wife because of what happened to me?" James took Li Wei's hand. "Sweetheart, what happened to you does not define who you are. You are not broken. You are not damaged. You are a beautiful, strong, intelligent woman who deserves love and happiness." Over the following months, Li Wei and Miguel's friendship grew into something deeper. Miguel was patient and understanding. He never pushed Li Wei to move faster than she was comfortable with. He understood that trust was something Li Wei had to give carefully. Miguel also fit in perfectly with the ranch family. He provided free veterinary care for all their animals. He taught some of the survivors how to take care of livestock. He brought his guitar on evenings and played music while everyone sat around the fire. A year later, on a beautiful autumn day, Miguel asked Li Wei to marry him. He proposed on the front porch of the ranch house, in the same spot where Li Wei and James had so many important conversations. "Li Wei," Miguel said as he got down on one knee, "you are the strongest and most amazing woman I have ever known. You took the worst things that could happen to a person and turned them into a way to help others. You turned a struggling ranch into a place of hope. You turned a lonely old man into a proud father. Li Wei started crying happy tears. I don't just want to marry you, Miguel continued. I want to join your mission. I want to help you save people and animals. I want to be part of this family you've created. Li Wei said yes through her tears. James, who had been watching from the kitchen window, came outside and hugged them both. The wedding was held right there on the ranch in the spring. Li Wei wore Sarah's wedding dress, which James had kept in a cedar chest. The dress fit perfectly, as if Sarah had known that someday another woman would need it to start a new chapter of love on the ranch. All the survivors from the ranch were there, along with Dr. Chen from the foundation, Agent Rodriguez and Agent Chen from the FBI, Ms. Rodriguez, the immigration lawyer, and many of the local farmers who had become friends over the years. Even Mr. Peterson came with his wife to celebrate. James walked Li Wei down the aisle between the rows of chairs they had set up in the pasture. As they walked together, James remembered that terrible day at the auction when he had paid $3 for this beautiful woman's life. Now she was starting a new life filled with love and hope. I'm so proud of you, James whispered to Li Wei as they walked. Sarah would be proud too. Thank you for saving my life, Dad, Li Wei whispered back. It still made James's heart warm every time she called him Dad. The wedding ceremony was performed by a judge who had become a friend of the foundation. As Li Wei and Miguel exchanged vows, there was not a dry eye in the crowd. Everyone there had witnessed Li Wei's journey from broken victim to confident survivor to successful businesswoman to beloved daughter to happy bride. After the ceremony, they had a big party with music and dancing and food from many different countries. Maria made tamales from Guatemala. Aisha prepared Somali rice with meat. Dimitri brought Russian bread and soup. Dewey made Chinese dumplings.